Joseph, wait!
What? I'm going to Nationals right now. What do you need?
You didn't make an intro for this week's video.
What's the deck?
DDD.
DDD's nuts. That's all I got. Okay, I'll see you later. Is that good enough for you?
Hey everybody, Joseph Rothschild here, aka MBT, back again with another episode of 10-Minute Testing. It's been a long couple of days since the 24-hour stream, and thank you to all who stopped by, but now that I'm once again rested and approaching sanity, it's time to tackle the daunting task of getting one of these filmed before Nationals. A bit of different content coming over the next couple of days, but for now, let's revel in the warm, comfortable glow of a Master Rule 3 deck finally receiving the support it deserves. Presenting DDD. So here's the list, and shockingly, it looks almost identical to the DDD of yesteryear. Bureaucracy never changes. As always, I'll give you a background about the archetype, a little bit of a discussion about what I hope the deck can do, and of course, the card by card. So firstly, for those of you that don't know, DDD is an archetype with a hilarious premise that is completely ruined by its overblown Yu-Gi-Oh! Card art. The smaller monsters, the DDs, are the peons, and the larger monsters, the DDDs, are the bosses, both in a gamer sense and a Marxist one. Thankfully, these main deck monsters are more than motivated to seize the means of production, and were famously playable as an exceptionally skill-intensive Master Rule 3 deck for all of 12 minutes until Zodiac came out. A significant number of their extra deck monsters have a similar gimmick. When a subordinate is summoned, they're able to reanimate one from the graveyard, which in turn triggers other identical effects from their unique bosses until they're able to assemble a formidable corporate ladder of Synchro, Fusion, and Xyz monsters. Unfortunately, Master Rule 4 was a regulatory nightmare for our fledgling capitalist overlords and left their portfolio especially susceptible to disruption. Until now, DDD's issue has been, and continues to be, a lack of zones. With as little as 2 zones, you could easily pop off like a 1930s oil baron with an unlimited supply of child labor, but getting there with a reanimation effect still live has been difficult, to say the least. Thankfully, Konami has extended an olive branch from one bloated corporate monolith to another and supplied us with a Link monster, who is currently negotiating a visa to the TCG. DDD Abyss King Gilgamesh, what a mouthful, let's call him Gil, is just the man to turn this company around. When he's special summoned, he sets scales, that's right, both scales, from your deck as DDs. While the scales aren't often conducive for pendulum summoning, Ragnarok is a reanimator, which breathes life into your otherwise languishing lines. It also helps that DDD would previously end up with just enough garbage on the field to justify a Link 2. This guy can be made with your Kepler and your Swirl Summon, your Swirl Fusion and your Swirl Summon, your Lamia and your Normal Summon, and so on. The power does come with a price, you are locked into DDs, but that's not too big of a deal because their upper management has always been world class. So with that, let's get into the card by card. Firstly, our 5 joint employees of the month. 3 of Swirl Slime, 3 of Necro Slime, 3 of Lamia, 3 of Savant Kepler, and 3 of Copernicus. After that is Gil's focus group, 3 Ragnarok, 2 Thomas, who conveniently recycles Kepler, removing rebuildability from the deck's weaknesses, 1 Spicy Orthos, and 1 Vice Typhoon. He's an intern. Finally, we've got 3 Ash Blossom. For spells, we're on 3 of the contract you want to draw, 1 of the contract you want to search, a Foolish, a 1-for-1, 3 Allure, 3 Desires, and 3 Called by the Grave. The extra deck is exceptionally tight. I mean, we can't just let anyone in. We're on 1 Big Gungus, 1 Dark, 2 Lil Gungus, Crystal Wing, Siegfried, Alexander, Meteor Burst, Kali Yuga, Hope Harbinger, Buster Blaster, Titanic Galactic Galaxy Dragon, Executive Caesar, Unicorn, 2 Gil, and a Link Haribo. So with that, let's jump into the games. Our first match is up against Tenyi Pacifist, and you fool! You've run into the only person on YGO Pro who understands what this deck does. Unfortunately, understanding is going to have to win the game for us because our hand is no help. We're also going second, which means our opponent is going to be able to set up. This is going to be an exercise in seeing just how much interaction we can play through. They'll lead with the Terraforming for a Pacifist, then normal summon a copy of Megalo Smasher X, adding a battle to hand and setting 2. For turn, we draw Kepler, which is something. We'll go ahead and activate Allure of Darkness. We find nothing. They'll activate Pacifist, and Pacifist will add a copy of Battle to hand. We'll normal summon this copy of Kepler, getting a Dark Contract with the gate, and when we set it, well, it gets battled, of course. Afterwards, we're going to activate Pot of Desires, and what do we find? But a whole lot of nothing. We will hard fuse into Lil Genghis before going into Gil. Gil will set scales, and then we'll activate Thomas's effect to try again next turn. We'll go into Big Genghis and Reborn Lamia with Ragnarok before getting in for 400 points of damage. Big Genghis is incredible in this matchup. Unfortunately, he immediately gets Vashudit. They find a Sea Stealth attack before attacking over this copy of Gilgamesh. We float into a Lil Genghis. They activate Card of Demise, find a Megalo Smasher X, and that is a set 5 board. Yikes. Well, we'll take 1,000 in standby. Then in main 1, we'll activate the effect of Savant Kepler. They will see Stealth attack, and the cat is out of the bag. How are we removing that? We're going to activate Dark Contract with the Gate, which immediately gets battled. We have another one in hand, which is something at the very least. They're able to float into a 3rd copy of Power. How many do you need? We'll go to Meteor Burst. They will power it. The one they have set, by the way. We'll activate Dark Contract again. There's battle, and wait, this is everything. We just have to bait out one more piece of negation. We'll use Abyss King Ragnarok to bring back Necro Slime before we go into Nightmare Unicorn, tucking back this copy of Pacifist. But that set card is Metaverse. We'll go into Swamp King, into Big Gungus, and go to battle phase. They'll activate Phantasm Spiral Power, and then we'll attack into the token. They'll activate Sea Stealth attack, but we'll negate it with our copy of Executive Genghis, and we have effectively solved the board. Unfortunately, they get a Pacifist token in the standby phase activation of our Dark Contract with the Swamp King. Well, it's not exactly solved, but we should be able to fix it from this position. We'll activate Necroslime's effect for Oracle King Dark. That reborns the Lamia. Afterwards, going to go into a copy of Siegfried. We'll activate Executive Genghis' effect. They'll activate Sea Stealth attack. We'll negate it with Executive Genghis. That's excellent news, and bring back Oracle King. We'll then negate the effect of Pacifist with Siegfried. They'll activate Sea Stealth attack number 2, and we'll overlay into Kali Yuga! They'll activate power, but it's far too late for that. I'll chain the effect of Kali Yuga, and finally, we're ahead. Our opponent draws for turn anything but card, and thankfully it's just a foolish they can't use. Our second match is up against Burning Abyss, splashing some of the new Bakura support, Spicy. We are once again going second, and once again our hand is miserable. What is this? I place my faith in the Heart of Allure of Darkness. Our opponent's going to lead with a copy of Dark Occultism, discarding a Silent Boots. Thankfully, we have the Ash, but less thankfully, they can now just banish the Silent Boots to get a copy of Fogblade to hand and set it. We'll draw for turn, and what do we find off the top but Copernicus? That's pretty good. We'll activate Allure of Darkness. This hand is looking sweet. And then we activate a second Allure of Darkness, and it looks like garbage again. Why do I do this to myself? Our opponent's going to Fogblade this copy of Kepler we got off 1-for-1, but then we can link into Gilgamesh with this copy of Lamia, and then activate Thomas's effect to try again next turn. We'll get in for 1800 and pass it back to our opponent. For turn, our opponent draws, oh shoot, a level 3. They'll normal summon a copy of Graf, special summon a copy of Alec, and go into Dante. They'll activate Dante's effect, please no good mills. Oh, thank God, no good mills. We'll Ash this copy of Graf, and that should end the turn. They'll attack into our copy of Gil, we'll float into a Big Gungus, and they'll pass it back to us. We should be able to pop off from this position. We'll normal summon a copy of Savant Kepler. That triggers Big Gungus' effect, bringing back Lamia. That Kepler is going to turn into a copy of Dark Contract with the Gate, which will reap dividends in a Swirl Slime. We'll then go into a copy of Gil, activate Ragnaros's effect to get back Gil number 2, and then activate Thomas's effect to get back Kepler, which we will send to the graveyard for Nightmare Unicorn's effect. We'll then go into Lil Genghis, bring back Lamia, trigger Lil Genghis' effect to bring back Gilgamesh, go to Meteor Burst Dragon to bring out Ragnarok, then use Ragnarok's effect to bring back Lil Genghis. Now this isn't lethal because Ragnarok halves all the damage you take over the course of the turn, but it's a pretty impressive board state nonetheless. We'll pass it back to our opponent and hope for the best. Our opponent draws for turn, they'll activate Dark Occultism, finding a copy of Lava Golem, now I get it, before conceding. Alright, so it's time for game 3, and you know what that means, a best of 3 versus meta. Our opponent's on Sky Striker, and look at this grip, yuck! We're going first, which is something at least, and our hand looks pretty good after we activate Allure of Darkness, so let's see what happens. We're going to normal summon a copy of Savant Kepler, and then we'll use its effect to get a copy of Dark Contract with the Gate to the hand, then we'll activate that effect to get Lamia to our hand. We'll set Ragnarok before going into a copy of Lil Genghis, special summoning Gil, and reborning Lil. We'll then special summon a copy of Lamia, activate the effect of Gus King Alexander in order to bring her back off of the fusion summon of Big Genghis and end on a Crystal Wing. It might not be an optimal setup, but it's pretty good. Our opponent's going to lead with a Spell Mining Cave, just invalidating our entire board. Now they're just doing Sky Striker things. They'll attack with Hayate, sending a 3rd spell so that they can draw 1,000,000 cards off of these 2 engages. They'll add a Hercules base and a copy of Shark Cannon. They'll activate Foolish Burial Goods, draw an additional card off of this Metal Foes fusion, go to Shizuku at end step reset 2, and add a copy of Widow Anchor to hand. For turn, we draw an Orthos, which is an out at the very least. We'll activate that to pop the Spell Mining Cave. They'll activate Eagle Booster in response. That's fine. We'll use Dark Contract with the Gate to get a Kepler, then use Kepler's effect in order to get a Swamp King. We will use that to fusion summon a copy of Oracle King Dark, then we'll attempt attempt to reborn Lamia, they'll attempt to banish the Lamia, we'll attempt to negate the banish, and they'll negate our negation. We'll go to battle phase and do like 4 damage. This is just negligible at this point. Yikes. Before passing it back to our opponent. Things are not looking good when they get to set 3. For turn, they're going to flip up a startup engage. We'll activate Ash Blossom, but I think that's just a little bit too late. They'll activate Hercules' Base's effect, resetting Kagari. They'll activate Kagari's effect to bring that engage back. We'll activate Crystal Wing. They'll activate Widow Anchor ×2, and Hornet Bit, and Shark Cannon, and we are just completely dead, I am sure. They'll take everything that's near and dear to us, and then they will go ahead and link summon a Heat of the Blazing Fire Charmer to bring back our Ash Blossom, a Brandish Maiden Hayate, and a Boral Sword Dragon. I think I've seen enough. Alright, well, that was pretty expected. For game 2, our hand is really, really good, and our opponent's is really, really bad. This might be the one we squeak by. We'll lead with a copy of Dark Contract with the gate, and they ash it. Even with a hand this good, I'm just so hesitant to allure, so let's just activate Swirl Slime. We'll activate the Grave Effect of Lamia, then activate Lil Genghis to bring back Swirl Slime so we can go into Gil without using Lamia, and set Scales. But we're not going to win with this setup. We have to allure. I do it. I'm rewarded. I find a Pot of Desires, another allure, a Kepler. We should have done this earlier. Think how hard we could have popped off. I'll go into Executive Genghis and bring back Swirl Slime with Ragnarok, and I think we're just going to have to be satisfied with this. It's not ideal, but that's my punishment for not being greedy earlier. Our opponent's going to activate Terraforming. We will Ash Blossom because I am not losing to Mystic Mine again. They're then going to activate Shark Cannon, so they have 3 spells in the graveyard and can clear our Executive Genghis before a set rotation, finding Mystic Mine. Okay, that's frustrating, but we do have the out, and more importantly, we have access to our win con. We'll fusion summon Oracle King Dark before bringing back Big Genghis. We'll go into Siegfried and Kali Yuga. They'll activate the Grave Effect of Brandish Airspace Area 0, but we have the Ash Blossom, so there will be none of that. For turn, they draw a copy of Widow Anchor, which is not enough. They'll go ahead and set it. We'll activate Kali Yuga at end step, and this should be game. We'll normal summon a copy of Savant Kepler, use its effect to get a Dark Contract to hand. We will activate Dark Contract to get a copy of Copernicus, activate the Grave Effect of Swirl Slime, special summon this copy of Copernicus, send a copy of Necro Slime, go into Gil again, set Scales, and then activate the Grave Effect of Necro Slime to go into Lil Genghis. We'll go to battle phase and clean this one up. So it's time for that all-important Game 3. Our opponent is going first, but their grip is not amazing. Ours, however, is. This is about everything we want to see. Let's see if making Kali Yuga again is enough. They're going to lead with a copy of Foolish Burial Goods, sending a copy of Engage, followed by a Rhoda for a copy of Ray. They'll use Ray's effect to go into Kagari, then Kagari's effect to add this Engage back to hand. They'll go into Shizuku, activate Engage, and we'll Ash Blossom it. They can't add Engage back, but unfortunately they are able to add the field spell, so we have 1 turn to clean this up. That should be all we need. We're going to lead with an Allure of Darkness. We'll then activate Dark Contract with Gate, activate the effect of Copernicus to send a Lamia, and then add a Swirl Slime to hand. We'll activate Swirl Slime for Lil Genghis, then activate Ragnarok to bring back Lamia. They'll banish it. Okay, we should still be able to pop off. We'll use Necro Slime to go into Executive Genghis and Swirl to special summon Thomas from hand, ending on Kali Yuga. We can thankfully clean up the Ray float from here. They're going to draw for turn, and it's one of the very few cards they can't pop for Area 0. Mystic Mine, thank you so much. From this position, we should be able to win. We'll use Copernicus' effect and Necro Slimes to go into Genghis before going into Gilgamesh, activating Genghis' effect for the Gilgamesh in Graveyard and resetting Scales should anything crusty occur. We'll go to battle phase, do 18, 18, 2K, and lethal with the big man himself. So we're back with the deck, and another victory for capitalism. Consider me a convert. Let's do the pros and cons. First, the pros. 1, it is really rewarding. A lot of the lines can be practiced without an opponent, meaning you'll be able to devote your own time to perfecting the art of getting ahead in business, and this solo combo practice will yield results. 2, their bosses are excruciatingly powerful. We're talking Bezos level. I mean, people tend to remember Kali Yuga as the payoff to Nightmare Bardish, but he's a whole lot better in his own dedicated deck, where his setup is protected by his underlings and his summon is unrespondable and devastating. And 3, you get to roleplay demon executives. I mean, you can have a lot of fun with that. And the cons. 1, it's hard. It's really hard. I'm sure I didn't play optimally, and given infinite time, I might not have then either. Previous iterations of the deck required literal 50-plus page combo guides for navigating lines, and while Gil simplifies things, it is still a learning experience. 2, it is very difficult to go second. Like Isolde in old warrior builds, Gil is often a must-resolve, and you can bet an opponent won't be letting it resolve more than once if they have the chance. And 3, it bricks. Like old DDD, drawing multiples of the same underling is miserable, and it happens often. There's nothing more upsetting than staring at a grip of triple Necro Slime. All in all, it's an exciting deck with setups so skill-testing they blur the line between work and play. I recommend it, but I can't do so in good conscience until Gilgamesh's application for citizenship is approved. So that's that. While I appreciate all of my viewers, a special thanks to my patrons, especially Colin Whalen, Michael Saumure, Ace Enigma, Adam Trevino, Adrian Bra, Distrin, Isaac Jackson, Lucas Geardis, and Second. If you want to see me play the decks I make on this show on stream, I'm on twitch.tv/mbtygo every Monday night from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.